Welcome to the third segment of our Third's Origin Stories. We are excited to bring to you our final part, our final segment from Three Thirds, aka The One, aka Ashante. So I hope you enjoy this time of getting to know all of us. And Ashante, I'll take it away.
All right. So earlier, Two Thirds talked about the comic book theme with the origin stories. And as I was preparing for this and trying to figure out what I was going to say, I realized in a lot of ways, this is more like the big reveal for a superhero, where you realize, like, She-Ra is Adora, or Superman is Clark Kent. Like, yes, there are people who know each of them, and sometimes those people are the same people, but like the bringing together of the two is this huge reveal. And that's significant to me because I'm a very private person, and so there are lots of levels to my layers of disclosure. And so those who are very close to me know a lot. Those who aren't really know what I allowed them to see. Um, so I decided I would open up the vault a little bit and disclose, but I'm going to start with the end in mind. I can't quite tell if that's a thing from Seven Habits of Highly Effective People or if it's too much law school training, but I'm letting you know where we're going. So I feel like my purpose in life is to break barriers and open doors for others. And also to find outlets for my creativity and my intuition. And in a lot of ways, those things are intertwined with each other. And I feel like my mother has this thing she's always said, that she's so happy that I picked her, that she believes that children pick their parents. And it's something I have come to believe. And I do believe that I picked my soul tribe. I actually believe I have a lot of soul tribes, but my first being my family. And I feel like I picked them because it really took a village to raise me. And so my mother, I'm going to take a step back, and this won't necessarily be chronological. One of the things I will say is that I have always had a very strong sense of self. And one of the best parts about my family was that they recognized that and nurtured it. So it wasn't even so much the messaging that they gave me, it was just that they allowed me to be, and that they did not try to contain me in a lot of ways, because I could do some weird stuff. And my grandmother would just be like, okay, baby, go. Um, and so I will say, because of that, I have always felt a little bit of an outsider. And I'm actually going to read a segment of Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, because I just love Trevor anyway. But this really spoke to me. And he says, "That's who I was, always an outsider. As an outsider, you can retreat into a shell, be anonymous, be invisible, or you can go the other way. You protect yourself by opening up. You don't ask to be accepted for everything you are, just one part of yourself that you're willing to share." He fast forward, he says, "I catch up a bit on conversation, learn more about their group, and then leave. I never overstay my welcome. I wasn't popular, but I wasn't an outcast. I was everywhere with everybody, and at the same time, I was all by myself." And a lot of my life, that has how I have felt. I've never strived to be a popular person. I didn't think that's what I wanted. Um, Ironically, I was born to two very cool parents, people who knew everyone and who everyone knew. So, like, growing up, I was always, little Joe and little dog. Like, everyone knew them, so they knew me. But I never felt like I was that cool or popular person. But I always felt like I really loved who I was, and I didn't care what anyone else thought. And my brother and I were having a conversation a couple months ago, and I was telling him I felt like I've always had very high self-esteem, but other people's esteem, I have no idea what anyone thinks of me, and I've always felt like it's really not my business. Like, you know, I know what I like, either you can get on board or not. But I've also always been a very perceptive person. And so I felt like in my family situation, I was always looking around for the parts that were similar to me and also recognizing what was different and kind of being this little sponge and soaking up what I wanted from everyone. And so it's a little bit of, I can be whoever you want me to be, but it's all me. I'm going to give you the parts that I feel like is most relevant to the situation. Um, Now, getting into a little bit of the actual chronology. um, so my mom had me when she was 22 years old. Um, my parents weren't married, and I think it's really interesting because when I talk about breaking barriers, I think one of the things, there are a lot of phrases or words you could say about me that paint one picture, but it's not the full story. And so when I say that, it's things like you could classify me as an illegitimate child. I was born out of wedlock. You could say I was a young Black girl who grew up in inner city Richmond at the time where it had the highest crime rate in the nation. And I literally went to sleep listening to gunshots or hearing helicopters fly overhead. But that is not a clear picture. Like I was, born out of wedlock, but very much born out of love. I was a planned pregnancy. I was, and I came knowing that while my grandparents weren't exactly elated about that, my family talks about kind of when I came, as babies can often have a way of doing, everyone kind of dropped their guard about that. And I think I kind of was born knowing I needed to show up and be charming and kind of, win people over. Um, Iyanla Vanzant talks about like the importance of your actual birth story and how that signifies what your life is going to be. And I was born a preemie, and I feel like that meant like I was already ready to go. And I often feel in life that I am a couple steps ahead of schedule on things. I also, like, they had to use forceps to bring me out. And there's a lot of struggle in that. And I feel like I was born knowing how to deal with struggle. I also was jaundiced and, had to be isolated and be put under the light. And that is kind of funny to me because I feel like part of why I'm here too is to be a light and to let my unique light shine. And so it's ironic to me that, in my first couple of hours on earth, I was isolated and under this light, and it was what was necessary for me to heal. But I feel like it's also symbolic of what I use to try to kind of be a healing balm to people. And, I am an introvert and I need my time alone. And so it's funny. It's like, okay, I'm here, y'all, but let me go be alone for a minute. Let me bask in this light some more, and then I'll be right back. But, getting back to my parents, my mom and I grew up living with my grandparents and her two younger brothers. She is one of five, but at that time, her younger brothers were still in high school, and so we were all in the house together. And in a lot of ways, my grandparents were like second parents to me. My mom worked night shift. She did not finish college when she was born with me, and she consciously made the decision that she was going, to go to work. And my being in the house, so she worked night shift. It was my whole point, but my grandparents were who I spent most of my day with, and particularly my granny, who was basically like my whole world. I'm wearing this crochet dress because she loved to crochet. And so that's what she would do all day. So if I wanted a sweater, she'd be like, what kind of sweater you want? And she'd crochet it. If I wanted new clothes for my doll, what do you want it to look like? And she'd crochet it. And so like that's just what she did all day. She had her own sort of business, and she, making things for her friends and selling it. But she also was just this very loving person, like really one of the best people I've known. And so it was interesting to me because like knowing that kind of love and feeling it so deeply, it really did empower me to just be who I was. My family also let me have a lot of time to myself. Like I didn't do sports, I didn't do, things like that. But like after school, if I did my homework, they would, okay, go outside and play. And I was the only child at the time. And so I had this huge imagination. Um, and so like I can remember things like them feeding into it, like, I talked about my uncles kind of feeling more like big brothers to me because again, I'm the little kid like chasing behind their ankles, while they're trying to go on dates and go do stuff. And I'm always in the way. But, to me, I was just like, okay, like I just want to be around. And I also feel like as far as feeling advanced, like I'm 4 or 5, I'm following, 15 and 16-year-olds, and I want to do what they're doing and I want to learn everything that they know. And so, like, always trying to like grow up fast. And my mom talks about the fact that at 13 months, I was having full conversations with people. Like, so I was just learning how to walk, but like I'm sitting on her lap like a little ventriloquist puppet, like talking to people and they're like, what is going on with your child? It was like she would just sit there and talk to me when she got home and like teach me how to form words. So I'm having, like I had something to say early on, and so I was saying it. But I will say that there are things like my uncle would joke with me and be like, oh, when an airplane flew over, he'd be like, if you jump up and down and tell them you want ice cream, they'll drop ice cream down. And of course, no plane ever dropped ice cream down. But things like that taught me imagination and excitement. And, like, and I think, our pastor will talk about imagination being directly linked to faith. And, if you let your child be imaginative, then it helps them to have faith when they need it down the road. And that's something I've found to be very true. I will say because I was an only child and I was the youngest one in the house, I was very used to getting my way. I did not share well. I was very selfish. And I can remember having a cousin who one day like would ask me for something and I was like, no, you can't have it. And he was like, okay, I'm gonna show you one day. And I'll mind you, like he is grown. He's like in his, late 20s. And I come to his house one day with my cousin who's my age, and we'd been out all day and we were hungry. And he's like, yeah, no, you can't have anything. She can have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but you can't because you'll never share. So no. And so like I'm sitting there by myself, looking real sad. And so later he comes over and he was like, do you think you can share now? And I'm like, yes, I can. And from that moment on, I have been a sharer. I've been very generous. And I think, if you talk to certain people, like that is what they will identify with me. But I very much think back to him in that moment. I was like, because before then, like that was not who I was. I think about my grandfather who actually never graduated high school because his father passed away when he was a teenager and he left school to be able to help take care of his family. But he was an entrepreneur. And so he actually went into the military and fought in World War II. And in doing so, he actually had a chance to study at Oxford. So like there was just a program where the soldiers who were overseas could take classes at Oxford. And so this Black man who hadn't finished high school was actually at Oxford and studying. I mean, and he was always smart as a whip. You did not want to play Jeopardy with him. You were going to lose. If he had actually been on the show, he would have walked away with all of the money. But he always, I mean, there were always periodicals around the house, always Reader's Digest, always National Geographic. It was always so important that we, knew that the world was bigger than just Churchill and just Richmond. And, that education was critically important. And like it was never a thought in my mind, even though I am technically a first generation college student, that I was going to college. Like that was just a given. And I had seen my aunts and uncles go to college. And so like I just knew like that was just the next logical step. And that was one of the clear messages that my grandparents and my family gave me, that education was just so important. um, I will say, like, in digging more into my actual family history, there were some things that came up, that really kind of did help to explain myself to me. I mean, because, while I think the kind of village concept and growing up in the extended family environment, I did definitely kind of bake a lot of things into me. And we talk about, like, folks that live in happiness zones, and that, having purpose and having, that family network really, impacts their outcome and their longevity and their overall happiness, that a lot of your happiness comes from DNA. And I think there's a lot of things that are passed down through DNA. But we're talking about my 3 times great grandmother, who was, as I understand it, a mulatto woman who was actually Native American and white, and was a nurse and also midwife. Um, and my understanding of the story is that she had gotten such a good reputation in the community that she could demand to be paid in gold. And at some point, she actually bought her husband's freedom from slavery, so that they could eventually marry. And I heard that, like, I think about, that kind of, like, think about a diva as a female version of a hustler. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this woman, and, those times, like, this is my 3 times great grandmother, right? Like, like slavery isn't over, and she is out there making these kind of moves, and and she is using her work to be the means by which she is able to set her family up for success. um, and that kind of spirit, I think, is something that has definitely flowed through me. And I'm like, yeah, I would definitely pick to be a part of this kind of tribe. I mentioned my grandfather, again, not having a high school diploma, but he owned his own fish market. He owned his own nightclub. I mean, he talked, was on the Chitlin circuit, and he talks about, like, having Aretha Franklin owe him money because she didn't have money for a cab, and he put her in a cab, and so, like, even when she passed away, I'm like, yeah, I know at the gates, Poppy's gonna be like, run me my money because you still owe me. Like, just little things like that, like, I felt like, regardless of the adversities that I faced, my family very much protected me from those labels. Like, they would not let me buy into what society might look at me and label me as. So in addition to having my own kind of internal fire, I feel like my family just kind of built this shield around me that was like, yeah, like, do you. And I mean, and a lot of my family members will talk about, like, no, we knew you were special, we knew you were different. And I think that's something I very much just felt, and no one took it away from me. And I think that was kind of the beauty of the situation. I also, like, now I'm in this period where I'm taking a sabbatical and just trying to kind of reconnect to that core, because I think over time I had eroded some of that fire from us. I'd ceded it to other people, and willingly. Um, and so trying to get back to that core, I've been trying to do things that I really enjoy. And it's been interesting as I think back, like, all of the things that I fall back on are all things that I saw or later learned that were passions of other family members. So lately I've been doing a lot of drawing. I love to paint. Um, my uncles who I grew up with, they were both really talented artists. And I can remember, like, looking at them do these projects for school, for high school, and I'm at like 4 years old trying to emulate it. Of course, it was crap when I tried to do it, but like later in life, I realized, like, oh no, now that you've caught up, so you're still up, like you can draw naturally, like you really enjoy doing this. But that was something that was birthed way back then, in Granny and Poppy's house. There was a period where I ran very slowly, more of a jog, but for long distances with 2/3 running all around Virginia.
Shuffling along.
Exactly. But I had uncles on my father's side who ran all the time. Like, so that was something I saw them doing. I love to dance. When I was really young, I could like snake to the right, but not to the left. So I did not feel like I was a good dancer. But I had a cousin who actually was a little younger than me, and he could do backflips and moonwalk and learn, and he was awesome. And so like that was something I wanted to take and something I wanted to do. And then one day I realized, like, I was dancing and someone was like, "Oh, you're good." I was like, "Oh, really?" I love to write poetry. I did not know this until I was in college, but my dad used to write poetry all the time. I mean, even, I am a lawyer. I did not know until well after I was in my legal career that it had actually been my dad's plan to become a lawyer. But because he did not go to college, that was an impossible dream. I mean, so it's just interesting to me, like I feel like I am an amalgamation of my family and their passions and their dreams. And it's like I really did kind of consciously and intentionally pull some things from them. I feel like there's also a lot that has just been genetically encoded into me. And I feel like that is with purpose, and that is intended to kind of help launch, the family forward into another level and continue to break barriers, you know, for the line. I feel like that was all over the place, but
Oh no,
No.
but it was perfect in the sense that it's like that you are multifaceted.
mm-hmm.
You are. I mean, when I think of you, it's like forget breaking a mold. There's no mold. There's no blueprint for the way that you live. There's no script that you are following. I have always loved the fact that you march to the beat of your own drummer. You are not concerned about what others think, and I believe that allows you to tap into all of just what you said, what's been deposited on the inside of you, and this creativity and this light. And I wrote down at the beginning when you were talking the word chameleon. And at first when you were talking, I was thinking of it in terms of like, you could be a shapeshifter and you could be this or that to fit the situation. But then the more I listened to you, the more that I thought, that's just who she is.
Mm-hmm. No,
one day I'm a dancer, one day I'm an artist, one day I'm a lawyer. And I love that you don't put boundaries on yourself.
And I think I am you mentioned this as well, like I'm a very perceptive person. And so it's always like I'm always being myself, but I don't necessarily have to give it all at the same time. And some of that is for protection. And and that's kind of why the Trevor Noah piece fit. Like, like he's talking about, no, like I'm being myself, but I'm just giving you this piece because I know that's what works in this moment. And then there are other times where I'm like, like the people who are very close to me are people who I feel like I can be my full self with naturally. And it feels like a safe space. Like, so whereas I can basically get along with anybody, you know, like if you're really going to come into the inner sanctum, then there has to be a level of trust and understanding that you can deal with all of it because it is a little here and there, like it's not linear.
Yeah. But I think that's what stuck out to me. I have had the privilege of knowing you since first grade.
So, fought over Crayola?
Fighting over who got the good Crayola crayons. And life and little people. Okay, you're going in a little bit, but we're recording. Thank you. And so, okay, thank you. But the opportunity to see that authenticity, like how your story weaves into it, is what just struck me, because as you were talking, I was like, yeah, like Nicole was just talking about, like you have literally always been just who you are, unapologetically, just sort of like, this is me, take it or leave it. And it is something I've always admired about you. And hearing your story, and like I feel like I need to go ask my parents about my birth story, because I'm like, that was interesting, like that view, right? And it's just like, wow. Now I'm curious, because I don't know if our listeners fully caught this, but we of course know that you have a brother and sister.
Yes.
But there's a big age gap. So how did that, when they came on the scene, how did that play in?
So my brother and sister are twins, and they are 10 years younger than I am. And I was super excited. Like, I was hella excited when I found out that, you know, my parents were, you know, gonna have them. And of course, at the time, they thought it was one baby. And then, like, I can literally remember the day my mom came home from the doctor's appointment, and she comes in with this, like, stunned look in her eyes. And she you know, tells her parents that, you know, because she's coming to pick me up from them. And so she tells them that she's having twins. And now, mind you, whereas my grandfather wasn't super enthused when I was born, like he and I actually had a parade through the house, like clapping and march, you know, that we were having twins. And, you know, he had come up with names for them, and he was naming them after, you know, him and then my dad's dad, because, you know, they knew each other. And so, you know, we were just so excited. My mom is still looking like, y'all are crazy. But I think she was concerned that I might feel a negative way about it because I had been the only child for so long. But I was just like, no, I'm gonna be a big sister, and this is gonna be so great. And I kind of I remember like having this doll. It was like a little Kimberly cheerleading doll, and I remember talking to Kimberly. I'm like, we're gonna have twins, and we're gonna take care of them, and you know, it's gonna be so awesome. And when they came, like, that's how I felt. Like, I think part of me felt like they were some living toys I had, right? But, you know, because I had them to play with, and, you know, to love and squeeze and hug and kiss and put in my pocket and call them George. But I really, I really did take being a big sister as a big responsibility. I will say, in high school, it was interesting. My brother and I were having a conversation about this because, like, I would watch them after school. Like, they went to an after school program, but my grandmother would pick them up. But there was still a gap between the time my mom, who was no longer working night shift then, but like when she would get home, so I would watch them. And so it was like, I would get home, I would start my homework, my grandmother would come with them. I would get them started on their homework if they hadn't finished everything at the after school program. And then, you know, mom would come home, we'd have dinner. I would finish my homework. And, and my brother was always really rambunctious and always kind of getting into stuff. And so he would do things like lock me into my room by like sliding crayons under the door. So, like while I'm doing homework. And so what he and I were talking about was like, if high school was stressful for me, which it was academically a stressful time, but it was also this time of where the school itself was not a typical high school experience, but I also did not have the stereotypical high school experience because after school, I wasn't staying to cheer or, do sports. I was going home to be big sister, which actually I never had a problem with. Like, I felt like that was what you did. And it kind of was what I saw growing up, like having my uncles and my aunts like help take care of me. And so it just felt like that's what family does. But I do recognize that kind of added to my maturity level, and my view of family. And it also colored my college experience because like there was a certain university that shall not be named that did not want me because I did not have enough extracurriculars, even though they understood what the reasoning behind that was. And they just didn't think I was going to be a good fit. When I got there, none of the other schools had a problem with it. And so when I actually got to UVA, like, not that I had anything to prove to them, but I felt like I had something to prove, to myself, to like, from afar, I'm going to show this other school that they're wrong. And I went all in on several activities and just was like, no, like, this is my time to really do exactly what I want to do. And so I'm going to do all of this stuff. I'm going to be super involved and you'll see. And I think I've always had a little bit of a rebellious spirit. And, like 9 times out of 10, I'm fine to follow authority because it makes sense to me. It's the times where it doesn't make sense that I'm just a rabble rouser. So
we may both have that affliction.
Yes. We are thirds.
I also just don't like being told what to do generally.
Well, if I'm going to do it anyway, you never had to say anything to me.
Hello.
It irritated me.
I feel that.
That was awesome. That was really, really awesome. I really enjoyed hearing your story and 1/3 your story. And I'm glad I got to share my story. I think these are things that you can have relationships with someone or relationships with folks for years and years and years and not know always the backstory, how they got to where they are. And I think this is really powerful because if it's not too boastful to say, I think we've all done really well for ourselves and in our lives. And I think sometimes people assume you were just hatched this way. Right. Like, oh, presto, insta fully formed woman. And the truth of the matter is there's always experiences, relationships that have shaped who you are and how you show up in the world. And those things are not always pretty, but that is what's beautiful, right?
Yeah. I think that's like, they're not always pretty, but what I also think about is there's also an ease for people to want folks to have like one or the other, right? You had this really easy life story, or you have this like hard knock. We're into Annie right now, so hard knock life story going, and it's not exclusive, right? There are moments that are easier, and there are moments that are harder, and they shape and inform who you are. But it's actually less the moments, but what you do with them that shape and inform who you are. And I think that's what I appreciated about the beauty of the three of us sharing our stories today, because as long as we've known each other, like, I think we all learned something about one another today. And that came from, just seeing the nuances. And when you have close relationships, I think sometimes it's even more powerful to hear those stories, because you can sort of see it through the lens of the depth of the relationship you have, and you're more able to see how those things show up in our lives. So I thank both of you for being so open and transparent, because we are all fairly private in our own ways. So I think it was really good to just have this time today. So thank you.
No, I think it's been amazing, and in many ways therapeutic to be doing this podcast in general, particularly during this time of self-isolation with quarantine. Even though my introverted self loves the isolation to a certain degree, it is still beautiful to have this outlet with you all and to be able to share, a bit of hopefully light and inspiration to, the masses.
I love it.
Okay. Well, ladies, that's our Origins Stories episode. I think it's in the can.
I think it's in the can.
Till the next one. And scene.